Previously on New Avengers, Captain America and Iron Man reformed the group in the wake of a storyline called Avengers Disassembled. Out were stalwarts like Hawkeye, the Vision, and Thor, all of whom were dead, and in were oddball characters like Luke Cage, Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, and the Sentry. Also, Spider-Man and Wolverine were there. The team came together during a riot at the supervillain prison known as the Raft, which was triggered by longtime Spider-Man enemy Electro. Turns out that Electro was hired by a rogue SHIELD unit operating out of the Savage Land in order to mine a vibranium deposit. After taking care of that, readers were introduced to the Illuminati, a secret group consisting of Tony Stark, Reed Richards, Charles Xavier, Black Bolt of the Inhumans, and Namor. The group had convened to discuss the Sentry, who believed he had killed his wife. Eventually, X-Men member Emma Frost stepped in to help the Sentry with his mental problems. Also around this time, Marvel had a crossover story called House of M that saw the Scarlet Witch manipulate reality so that most of the heroes, most of whom were actually the mutant characters, could live their ideal lives. Eventually, this resulted in all but 198 mutants losing their powers, and only the heroes really remembering the events of the story. Also, Hawkeye was resurrected but didn't rejoin the team as he left to track down Scarlet Witch to figure out why this was the case. From there, the New Avengers would have an adventure in Japan where they encountered a fully costumed figure named Ronin, who everyone thought was Hawkeye, only for it to actually turn out to be Maya Lopez, aka Echo. After that, the team confronted Jessica Drew about her true motives. More on that later. Then, a man named Michael Pointer had his mutant gene activate, which caused him to absorb all of the depowered mutant energy sent out from the House of M storyline. This in turn sent him on a path of destruction. While working with S.H.I.E.L.D., Spider-Man inadvertently let slip to a telepath the events of House of M, which further strained the relationship between the two organizations. Now at around this time, there was another crossover storyline called Civil War, and since the story arc we're covering today ties into that event, we have to talk about its early parts. Early 90s teen super team, the New Warriors, reunited when they got their own reality TV show. However, in an attempt to boost sagging ratings, the group staged a live broadcast where they tried to get a jump on a group of supervillains. This in turn resulted in a massive explosion that killed 600 people, mostly school children. Before that incident even took place, however, Congress had actually introduced a bill called the Superhuman Registration Act, which would require all superpowered beings to register with the government and act as government employees. Tony Stark, being a futurist and believing that this was the way the world was already heading, encouraged his fellow members of the Illuminati to support the act, though many wound up not doing that. However, in the wake of the Stamford incident, the public outcry became so much that the Superhuman Registration Act passed through Congress immediately. However, there will be two factions within the superhero community, those like Tony Stark and Reed Richards, who supported the act no matter what, and those like Luke Cage, who opposed it, believing it to be a violation of civil liberties. In the hours before the act became a law, S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Maria Hill ordered Captain America to begin rounding up unregistered superheroes. However, Steve Rogers himself opposes the act and immediately rebelled, taking out S.H.I.E.L.D. agents as well as Iron Man before going on the lam. These events lead directly into New Avengers Volume 5, which has the alternating title of Disassembled and Civil War. So, that's what we're covering today. This is Volume 5 of New Avengers. Captain America flees the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier and heads back to his apartment in Brooklyn. Of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. is tracking him, so there's not really too much time for rest. He begins taking out his various pursuers, nearly killing one of them, only to realize that it's Dum-Dum Dugan, a trusted friend, which means Maria Hill is really playing dirty, trying to appeal to Rogers' sentiments. Cap instead takes Dum-Dum's radio in order to temporarily stage his death, which should hopefully buy him enough time to duck into the sewers and head towards an old safe house that Nick Fury, the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., kept off the books. Cap arrives at the safe house to find Falcon waiting for him. It takes a few trust exercises for the two to figure out they're on the same side. That being said, they're going to need more to try to take this thing down. So the two begin covertly trying to make their way back towards Avengers Tower to recruit reinforcements. That being said, when the two encounter Spider-Man, they know that that's probably a lost cause. Spider-Man is out, as shortly after he joined the New Avengers, he began forming a deep bond with Tony Stark, with Iron Man taking something of a mentor role, even to the point that Tony actually gifted Peter Parker a new super advanced outfit dubbed the Iron Spider Armor. It got to the point that in the second issue of Civil War, Tony managed to convince Spider-Man to reveal his identity as Peter Parker to the general populace, in a move that I'm sure will not have any negative ramifications whatsoever.
Cap and Falcon confront Hank Pym, but he's already registered as he agrees with Iron Man, and he's totally not a Skrull. When the two renegades try to leave, Pym tries to wrangle them in via his Giant Man powers, but they fight their way free and elect to move on.
From here, it's on to Luke Cage, who opposes the Superhuman Registration Act. However, there's some complications involved, as he's recently married his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Jessica Jones, shortly after the couple's daughter, Danielle, has been born.
Iron Man and Carol Danvers pay the couple a visit, but the two are just not having it, as neither of them want to be seen as tools of the American government. Tony attempts to point out that, as parents of a newborn, neither of them would ever be sent out on a dangerous mission, but the answer is still no. Tony and Carol continue to plead with Luke and Jessica to register, as neither of the couple exactly have the greatest legal standing, Luke already having served a time in prison, and Jessica having once been under the employ of the supervillain the Purple Man. But it's to no avail, meaning that once midnight strikes and the law goes into effect, Luke and Jessica will become fugitives. Jessica plans to bolt to Canada, but Luke will stay behind to bide them time. He tells his neighbors to stay inside as S.H.I.E.L.D. forces soon arrive. However, before they can knock down the door, a S.H.I.E.L.D. flies in to knock out the S.H.I.E.L.D. forces. This harkens the arrival of Captain America, the Falcon, and Daredevil. Sort of.
Okay, so Daredevil here, that's not Matt Murdock. Matt Murdock is actually in prison on items unrelated to the Superhuman Registration Act, but that's a different story for a different time. Now, who is Daredevil exactly? It's not mentioned here or in the main Civil War series. I think it might be in the next volume of New Avengers. Admittedly, that's kind of the problem when you review story arcs that tie into other story arc events.
In Ontario, Jessica stops off to buy baby formula, where she sees footage of her husband fighting for his freedom on the television, and with tears in her eyes looks on, knowing that Danielle has a father that she can look up to.
We now move on to Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, whom, if you recall earlier, had gotten into hot water with her teammates, as it was revealed that she had actually lost her powers only to have them restored by the terrorist organization Hydra in order to spy on both S.H.I.E.L.D. and the New Avengers. However, Nick Fury had figured this out long in advance and had asked Jessica to spy on both Hydra and the Avengers. And when the Avengers found out, they asked her to spy on both Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D., making her something like a septuple agent at this point. Also, she's totally not a Skrull.
An unregistered Jessica Drew tries hiding out at a hotel where she receives a visit from Nick Fury. However, she quickly susses out that this is a life model decoy being operated by Maria Hill. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents soon swarm the room and overwhelm Jessica to bring her on board the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. Once there, Maria reveals that Iron Man outed her as a triple agent, and now Jessica is expected to register and fight against Captain America or be arrested for treason. Jessica is unwilling to do so, as Steve Rogers was one of the few people who stood up for her when she dealt with her revelations with the New Avengers. The interrogation soon gets interrupted by Hydra hitting the helicarrier with an EMP so they can get on board and grab Jessica as S.H.I.E.L.D. scramble to keep the ship from crashing. Jessica soon wakes up on Hydra Island, where her liaison Donnelly tells her that the organization wants her to take over and become the new Madam Hydra. Jessica proceeds to knock out Donnelly and fight her way off the island.
And to finally get some new clothing on, as she's pretty much spent this entire issue entirely in her underwear. Yeah, I know a bunch of y'all think that's really hot, but all I can think about is that she hasn't showered or gone to the bathroom at all during this, so maybe it isn't as attractive as you think.
Having had her fill of just about everything, Jessica heads towards another Fury safe house, where she finds Cap and his resistance crew waiting for her. She tearfully asks for them to take her in because
I got nowhere else to go! I got nowhere else to go!
Moving on to the Sentry, whose mental health has been completely exhausted, so he's sought some solitude on the moon. Unfortunately, he's treaded into the territory of Black Bolt and the Inhumans during a time when tensions are high.
In the wake of the House of M storyline, one of the depowered mutants, Quicksilver, formerly of the Avengers, and ex-husband to Black Bolt's sister Crystal, attempted to regain his powers by exposing himself to the Terrigen mists that give the Inhumans their abilities. Quicksilver then stole several of the crystals to try to use on other depowered mutants, to mixed results. This resulted in a military exchange between Earth forces and the Inhumans that has heightened tensions between the two groups.
The Sentry apologizes, saying that he was just looking for some peace and quiet. He wasn't trying to tread into the Inhumans' territory. After a telepathic scan proves this to be true, Black Bolt invites the Sentry back to Adelon for a dinner so that he can learn more about the superhuman civil war that's going on. It also doesn't hurt that Crystal seems to remember that she and Bob had some type of relationship on Earth during a downtime between her relationships with Quicksilver and the Human Torch.
Weird, given that Bob Reynolds, aka the Sentry, married his high school sweetheart. I don't know when he had the time to possibly even date Crystal.
All of this gets interrupted by the sudden arrival of Iron Man to lobby for Sentry to join his side. However, the Sentry thinks that the only way the Civil War is really going to end is with the death of Captain America.
That will in no way become oddly prophetic whatsoever.
However, Tony Stark refers to Bob Reynolds as a friend first, not a soldier, and that's enough to convince the Sentry to leave, though not before promising that in no way will the Civil War come to Adelon.
Now, World War Hulk coming to the Inhumans, that's a different story altogether.
Iron Man makes his way back to Stark Tower, where he finds that his butler and longtime friend Edward Jarvis has been shot, and another electromagnetic pulse is set off, neutralizing his armor for the second time in the past week. S.H.I.E.L.D. has already been alerted to the break-in and is trying to mount an offense, however there's a force field blocking the building. It turns out that this attack is being staged by a Stark Industries employee named Kenny, who is upset that Tony Stark co-opted technology that he promised would make the world a better place and used it for war, in particular to attack Captain America of all people. Feeling that he needs to show Tony Stark the true cost of war, Kenny pulls out an antimatter generator that will pull all of Stark Tower into a void. However, as he begins starting up the generator, Maria Hill realizes that the force field that's blocking the building is only designed to stop groups of people, not a single operative. To that end, she manages to break in the building and starts making her way up the stairs of a massive skyscraper. Hill manages to make her way to Stark's office and kill Kenny before neutralizing the antimatter generator with a small explosive. After a trip to the S.H.I.E.L.D. Helicarrier Infirmary, Hill approaches Tony. She knows that she doesn't really carry much weight in S.H.I.E.L.D., as it's still seen as Nick Fury's agency, and the other agents really don't respect her. However, they do seem to respect Tony Stark, so maybe she should step aside and allow for him to take over as director of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And that concludes our look at Volume 5 of New Avengers. How was it? Well, I really like the artwork throughout this. It's a rotating set of artists, but it doesn't feel like too much of a tonal shift because I think there's some strong character pieces in here as well. In particular, the Captain America Falcon, the Luke Cage Jessica Jones, and of course the Jessica Drew Spider-Woman stories really do stand out. If there's a drawback is that, first and foremost, I think the Sentry and Iron Man stories are just kind of dull. They're not entirely great. They're just kind of very padding. There's actually a missing issue in this. The next issue after this follows Hawkeye and his adventures trying to track down the Scarlet Witch. And I think that actually should have been in here because I think that was more of an important story than to have it be in the next volume. And I think that kind of leads to the main problem overall, which is there's not a lot of action in this. I mean, it's New Avengers. Could we maybe get more teamwork here? It seemed like this is mainly just solo stories. Again, I understand Civil War was going on at this time, and so that's probably where most of the action is, and I think that's also part of the problem. This works in a grand narrative like Civil War or even New Avengers if you're going through an omnibus. I know they've been doing omnibus editions of this, but I don't think Civil War is included in any of them. It really feels like it needs to be part of a bigger story. I mean, just to have it be on its own like this doesn't really work. It just makes it feel a little off-kilter. And so that's why, even though this isn't necessarily bad, I can't really give it a huge recommendation of any kind. It's just, like I said, it's very fillery / peripheral. It doesn't feel like it really needs to be its own standalone volume. And that's why I have to give Volume 5 of New Avengers a D. Like I said, it's not bad, it's not terrible, it's just inconsequential. Like, I can't even pump it up to an average because it feels like you have to be reading all this other stuff to understand what's going on. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can support my work at patreon.com/CP Time for Cat Productions, where you can even request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so that you can be notified for further videos.